You walk into an all-you-can-eat buffet with one simple idea in your head. Pay once, eat as much as you want. No math, no anxiety about the final bill. To most people, that feels like one of the last genuinely fair deals left in the restaurant business. A place where, as long as you're hungry enough, you always come out ahead. Almost none of that is true. Buffets don't survive because you eat less than you think you will, though that helps. They survive because the entire room, the plates, the lighting, the order the food sits in, is engineered to make you feel full before you've eaten enough to actually hurt them. And here's the second twist. This is one of the most fragile business models in American dining. Chains that once ran hundreds of locations have all but vanished, and the ones still standing survived by breaking almost every assumption the format was built on. Before you get anywhere near profit, owning a buffet demands a different scale of investment than nearly any other restaurant format. Start with the floor itself. Golden Corral, one of the last major chains still standing, runs dining rooms of roughly 5,000 square feet, seating close to 475 people at once. That's not a restaurant. That's closer to a small event venue, and you're paying rent on all of it, every day, whether it's full or half empty. Then there's the equipment. This is where a lot of first-time owners underestimate what they're signing up for. A buffet line isn't just tables with trays on top. You need chafing dishes to hold food at safe temperatures for hours at a stretch. Sneeze guards, refrigerated salad bars, ice bins, specialized serving platters built to withstand constant public handling. Some operators even install induction cooktops so guests can watch an omelet get made fresh. None of it is optional. None of it is cheap. Chains like Golden Corral treat the buffet line itself as a major capital investment, a custom-built system, not an add-on bolted to an existing kitchen. And then come the fixed monthly costs, the ones that don't care how many people actually show up. Rent, utilities, insurance, base staffing, depending on location and size, that typically runs somewhere between $25,000 and $75,000 a month before a single plate goes out. Pricing tells you exactly who can compete here. A budget buffet, the $15 to $18 kind, has almost no room to breathe. It needs food costs held near 30% of revenue just to survive. Push upmarket, $35 to $45, carved meats, seafood towers, and the math loosens a little, tolerating food costs as high as 40 or 45%. But that flexibility comes at the cost of an entirely different customer base, one willing to pay a premium for what is, structurally, still the exact same gamble. So how does a business with margins this thin, sitting on top of costs this heavy, actually make money? The truth is a buffet isn't one revenue stream. It's 5, stacked on top of each other. And most of the real profit hides in the layers a customer never thinks to look for. The ticket price itself is calculated backwards. Most restaurants price a dish around what it costs to make. Buffets flip that. Operators pick a target food cost percentage first, usually around 30%, then work backward. Take the estimated food cost per guest, divide by that target, and there's your price. $6 in food cost, divided by 30%, lands you at a $20 buffet. It's not really a menu price. It's an algebra problem wearing a dinner's clothes. That same backward logic shapes what shows up on the line in the first place. A normal restaurant with a fixed menu has to source the same ingredients year-round, in season or not. A buffet doesn't have to play by that rule. Strawberries cheap this month? Strawberry shortcake shows up on the dessert bar. Beef prices dip? More beef appears. Potatoes and rice, bought by the truckload, stay cheap almost regardless of season. It's a small thing, But it's part of why buffets can hold food costs relatively steady even while grocery inflation swings costs at other restaurants by 15 to 30% over a year. Then there's the gap between what different foods actually cost and where they get placed. Walk down any buffet line and the order isn't random. Starches and vegetables come first, always. A fully prepped serving of potatoes might cost the restaurant around 30 cents. A serving of steak, sitting a few feet further down that same line, can run past $2, nearly 8 times more. Buffets aren't hoping you fill up on the cheap stuff before you reach the expensive stuff. They're counting on it, and the research backs them up. Something like 75% of customers take whatever sits in the very first tray they see, and roughly 2/3 of everything a person eats comes from just the first 3 trays on the line. Bread, rice, salad. None of that is filler. It's the actual profit mechanism, sitting exactly where your eyes land first and your plate fills fastest. Even the plates are part of the design. Buffets almost universally hand out smaller plates than a standard restaurant would, and that's not an accident dressed up as cost-cutting. It's lifted straight from behavioral research. Diners given smaller plates tend to feel full by the end of a meal. Diners given larger plates, even with identical food in front of them, often walk away still hungry. Meanwhile, the drinking glasses go the other direction entirely. Oversized, because water and soda cost the restaurant almost nothing, and a big glass fills a stomach for pennies. Speaking of drinks, this is the layer that surprises almost everyone. They quietly do more work than the food itself. A soft drink might cost the restaurant 25 to 50 cents to pour and sell for $2.50 to $3.50. Call it 10 times markup on something that's mostly ice and syrup. Wine is worse, or better, depending which side of the counter you're standing on. $2 or $3 in, $7 to $10 out. Multiply that across a full dining room, and beverages alone can account for 15 to 25% of total revenue. Some operators have said, half joking, that drink sales alone cover their entire labor bill for the night. Which means, in a strange way, the food might be the loss leader here. The soda fountain is the actual business. Smart operators layer pricing on top of all this, too. Lunch buffets typically run 20 to 30% cheaper than dinner. Weekdays undercut weekends. Kids and seniors get their own tier. None of this is generosity. It's demand management, quietly shaping who eats, when, so the kitchen never has to guess how much food to put out. Labor is where the format genuinely earns its reputation for efficiency. And this part is almost hard to believe until you see the numbers side by side. In a normal sit-down restaurant, one cook working the line might realistically serve 25 customers an hour, and that's on a good night. A buffet cook, prepping large batches for a self-service line, can produce enough food to serve 200 people in that same hour. Not a small gain, an eightfold one. No servers running individual tickets back and forth, no plating each dish to order. Just a skeleton crew keeping trays full and stations stocked. It's the single biggest reason buffets can survive on margins that would sink almost any other restaurant format outright. And then there's the strangest layer of all. The one that's really just arithmetic, wearing a food costume. The big eater is barely a problem. Picture someone who eats 3 times what an average customer eats. Instinctively, that person feels like a walking loss. Run the numbers, though. Say the average customer costs the restaurant around $7 in food and pays $20. A heavy eater might run up $16 or $17 in food cost against that same $20 ticket. A real loss, but a small one, maybe $8 or $9 underwater. Now sit that same heavy eater between 2 other customers, one eating a completely average amount, one loading up mostly on cheap carbs and barely touching the protein station. The undereater alone generates several dollars of pure profit. Spread across a dining room of a few hundred people, the handful of vacuum cleaners, as one operator bluntly calls them, just get absorbed into the crowd, almost invisibly. Part of why this works comes down to something researchers call sensory-specific satiety. The idea that variety extends how much we eat, but only up to a point, since our interest in any one flavor fades fast with repeated bites. Buffets exploit this in both directions at once. Enough variety to pull you through the door, enough repetition once you're seated to naturally cap how much you actually finish. Add in what's sometimes called unit bias, our habit of treating one ladle, one scoop, one slice as the correct portion, regardless of how hungry we actually are. And the plate fills and empties itself according to a script the restaurant wrote, not according to genuine appetite. Stack all 5 of these layers together, and something strange comes into focus. The food you're served is almost beside the point. The real profit comes from where items sit on the line, the markup on what you drink, how few people it takes to keep 200 plates moving, and a statistical bet that most people, most of the time, simply won't eat as much as they think they will. That bet works, right up until something disrupts the two things this entire model depends on absolutely: volume and food cost discipline. Lose either one, even briefly, and every layer that made this business efficient starts running in reverse. Here's the mechanism, and it's worth being precise, because this is the part that actually kills these businesses. A buffet cannot scale down gracefully. Think about what a normal restaurant does when business slows. It just cooks less. The cost curve bends with demand almost automatically. A buffet doesn't get that option. Whether 50 people walk in tonight or 400, the line still has to look full. Every chafing dish still needs stocking. Every station still needs to look abundant. Because the entire value proposition, the actual thing customers are paying for, is the appearance of endless variety. A half-empty buffet doesn't read as a smaller buffet. It reads as a failing one. Customers can tell instantly. So the moment volume drops, the restaurant faces an impossible choice. Keep the line fully stocked anyway, and food cost as a share of revenue spikes, because you're now cooking full-scale batches for a fraction of the guests, or thin the line to match lower demand, and you damage the exact thing that justified the price in the first place, which drives even more customers away. Both paths point the same direction: down. There's no stable middle position, and that's not a metaphor. It's closer to a mechanical fact of the business model. A traditional restaurant that loses 30% of its customers loses roughly 30% of its costs along with them. A buffet that loses 30% of its customers keeps almost all of its costs because rent, equipment, base staffing, and minimum food prep barely move at all. You can watch this play out in real numbers, and it's brutal. When dine-in traffic collapsed in 2020, Golden Corral's sales didn't dip modestly. They fell 62%. Read that again. 62%. At a chain that was otherwise one of the healthiest buffet operators in the country. 2 of its largest franchisees, running dozens of locations between them, filed for bankruptcy in the aftermath. This wasn't a company that mismanaged its menu or lost touch with its customers. It was a well-run business whose cost structure simply had nowhere to go once volume disappeared. Now, stack a second trap on top of the first, because this is where things turn genuinely lethal. Debt. A buffet chain with a fixed cost problem is fragile. A buffet chain with a fixed cost problem and heavy acquisition debt is a countdown clock. when Buffets Inc. merged with Ryan's Restaurant Group in 2006 to create one of the 5 largest casual dining companies in the country, the deal came wrapped around more than $800 million in debt. That debt doesn't care whether the dining room is full or empty. It has to be serviced every month on a fixed schedule, entirely independent of foot traffic. Combine a business that can't shrink its costs with a lender who won't shrink the payment, and you get a structure that can absorb almost no shock at all. Sure enough, that debt climbed past $900 million by the time the company filed its first bankruptcy in 2008. 32 locations closed that year. 78 more the year after. Let's actually follow that company through, because its full story is close to a masterclass in this exact trap. Buffets Inc. was founded in 1983 when the first Old Country Buffet opened. It went public just 2 years later with only 7 locations, a size that sounds almost quaint now. By the mid-1990s, after merging with Hometown Buffet in 1996, it controlled a few hundred restaurants and looked, by any measure, like a genuine buffet powerhouse. Then came July 2006, and the deal that would define the next 15 years of its existence, the Ryan's merger. On paper, it was a triumph. $876 million. 675 restaurants across 42 states, one of the 5 largest casual dining companies in the nation. The press release practically glowed, promising customers delicious meals at a great value in a family-oriented environment. Cracks appeared almost immediately. The company underreported losses tied to the merger and had to restate its financials. It was left carrying over $800 million in debt, with losses widening even before the 2008 recession hit. By the time that first bankruptcy filing came, debt had climbed past $900 million. What followed wasn't a recovery. It was a slow dismantling, the kind analysts would later call a zombie chain. A business kept alive just long enough for new owners to strip costs, close stores, and squeeze out whatever cash was left. Ownership changed hands repeatedly. A related brand, Furs, went through its own separate bankruptcy before folding into the same corporate structure. Then 2020 hit, and the pandemic didn't create a new problem so much as detonate one that had been building for over a decade. The company, by then operating as Buffets LLC, alongside sister company Fresh Acquisitions, filed what amounted to its 4th bankruptcy. A 5th, if you count Furs separately. Old Country Buffet, Hometown Buffet, Ryan's, names that once meant hundreds of restaurants across the country, gone effectively for good. What's left today is a fraction of a fraction, a reshaped Furs concept, and a handful of Tahoe Joe's steakhouses under new ownership, a footnote to what was once a 600-restaurant empire. Sizzler tells a similar story, just on a longer timeline. Founded in Culver City, California in 1958, as a hybrid between fast food and sit-down dining, it added a salad bar in the 1970s and a full buffet in the 1990s. A decision its own current CIO has since admitted actually hurt the business, since the buffet's upkeep ate into margins while crowding out dining room space that could have seated more paying customers. By 1996, squeeze between cheaper fast food on one side and better mid-tier competitors on the other, the chain closed 136 locations and laid off 4,600 employees in a single year, then filed for its first bankruptcy. It filed again in September 2020, blaming the pandemic, though sales had already been sliding roughly 4% the year before COVID even arrived. A sign the underlying business was weakening well before any outside shock hit it. From a peak of more than 700 locations, Sizzler now runs around 74, most of them clustered in its home state. And then there's the case that shows just how fast this can collapse once it actually starts. Souplantation and Sweet Tomatoes, sister chains built around a 50-foot salad bar, were running close to 100 locations combined as 2020 began. 2 months into the pandemic, their parent company concluded the buffet model simply couldn't survive a world suddenly terrified of shared serving spoons, and made a decision no other chain in this story made. It didn't wait to find out. It filed for liquidation. All 97 restaurants closed permanently. 4,400 people lost their jobs, essentially overnight, not over years of slow decline like Sizzler or Old Country Buffet, but in a matter of weeks. So which future actually waits for a buffet owner? The slow bleed of Buffets Inc.? The sudden death of Souplantation? Or something else entirely? There is a best case, and it's worth taking seriously because it's real. Golden Corral survived the exact same shock that killed its competitors by breaking the one rule this entire model was built on. It stopped insisting the buffet had to stay identical no matter what. It shifted toward a more flexible, table service-assisted approach. It redesigned locations with smaller footprints, cutting the very fixed cost exposure that sank everyone else. It invested in staff training and technology instead of just more square footage. By 2023, individual locations were reporting weekly sales above $100,000. A genuine rebound, and proof the trap isn't inescapable, only unforgiving toward anyone who doesn't see it coming early enough. The worst case needs no embellishment. It's just the ledger, stated plainly. 5 bankruptcies under one corporate umbrella. 97 restaurants closed in a single filing. 4,400 jobs gone almost overnight. Chains that once ran in the hundreds, reduced to a defunct website, and a soup bowl for sale on Amazon, for anyone feeling nostalgic enough to buy one. What separated the two outcomes was never the quality of the food, or even the strength of the brand. Golden Corral and Old Country Buffet were both, at their peak, genuinely beloved. The real difference was which owners understood, early enough, that they weren't actually running a restaurant in the way most people picture one. They were running a machine that could only operate in one gear. Full volume, full spread, full commitment, with almost no way to downshift the moment the world stopped cooperating. And that's really the thing worth sitting with. Every other restaurant format sells you a meal. A buffet sells you an illusion of abundance so convincing that an entire industry built itself around protecting that illusion at any cost. Right up until the day the illusion, not the food, is the first thing to run out.